Hey guys, I'm Game Advisor and welcome back to another Icarus update video. Today we're going to be talking about the week 35 update, which is called Attachment Systems. If you guys didn't already know, basically what they're doing in this update is they're adding in a whole new system that involves attachments, which is what the title kind of says. But the way this actually works is that there's 25 attachments currently available, and they are only available for a range of melee weapons and tools. This means your bows and guns, things like that, are not going to be able to receive any of these attachments, at least at this point in time. Now, these attachments will also only be equipable on crafted items of tier 2 and above. And there's an important thing to note, which we will talk about later, and that's that you can actually put attachments on a caveworm weapon, including the caveworm knife. And we'll talk about why that's important here in just a minute after we go over what all the different attachments actually do. Now, to get any of these attachments, though, you're simply just going to have to research them in your blueprint tree. It's very cheap to do. There's 4 points involved with all of the new items altogether, so you don't have to go and buy every single one individually. Now, you will get 2 different alteration benches in that blueprint tree, being the tier 3 and the tier 4 one. The tier 3 alteration bench will allow you to make most of the tier 3 little modifiers or attachments, whatever we want to call them throughout this. But either way, all you need to know is that the tier 3 bench can do the tier 1 crafting recipes for the most part, and the tier 4 bench can do the tier 2 crafting recipes for the most part. There is no tier 3 or 4 crafting recipes as far as the actual tier of the modification that it applies. Now, if you're ever not sure if one of these modifications can be applied to something, all you need to do is make sure that it has a little white box in the corner of it, which is a signifier that, hey, this item can receive an attachment. So if you're not sure, that's how you're going to figure it out. It is worth noting that nothing you bring into the mission, at least at this point in time, can be modified. But nonetheless, again, we can modify a caveworm knife. And this is important because one of the modifiers gives you a bleed, a stun, or a poison effect. And this is incredibly powerful. If you do go ahead and put these modifiers on your caveworm knife, it can do some insane damage extremely quickly. I personally think the electric one plus the caveworm knife is a little bit too overpowered at the moment, to the point where you can actually almost out DPS a semi-automatic rifle. But either way, it's a lot of damage and it's very, very powerful. In order to make that, though, you will have to make it on the tier 4 bench. And again, when I'm saying tier 4 bench, I'm referencing the blueprint tier 4. So it is going to craft you a fair amount of resources. Now, I do want to mention these benches are fairly expensive to get. The tier 3 one is going to require some iron ingots, epoxy, and a few other materials. And the tier 4 one is just going to require some electronics and such. With that being said, let's just go over what each of the different attachments generally do. Now, I may not go into each one exactly, but I'll cover each category at the very least. We have 2 that will affect your melee damage or attack speed. These have a tier 1 variation and a tier 2 variation. You have a prime meat, leather, and carcass harvesting attachments, which change the amount of resources you gather from actually harvesting animals. You then have some ore attachments, which give you gold, copper, platinum, or titanium, depending on which one you apply, and it just increases the amount, not the speed. And then you have the reaping attachment, which will actually just get you more resources whenever you're using your scythe. Now, all of these have tier 2 variations of them, which will make them significantly better. The unfortunate part about that, though, is sometimes you might want to use the tier 1 attachment until you get the resources to make the tier 2 one. Well, thankfully, they've thought ahead and they said, hey, all you need to do is put that tool with the attachment back into the new bench and then unattach the attachment and use that tier 1 attachment in the recipe for your tier 2 attachment. I think this is brilliant, as it's something that shows the devs are thinking ahead and actually played it and said, hey, it's not fun to have to craft an extra one when we've already made one, so let's just let them take it off so they can apply it to the tier 2 variation, because again, the tier 1 attachment is involved in the tier 2 attachment creation, so that they don't have to craft it again, and then they can just equip the tier 2 one. This is, again, super useful, but at the end of the day, I don't think we're going to be using these a whole ton, except for maybe boss fights, or maybe when you're in your outpost just grinding, because the amount of time it takes to craft these benches is usually not worth the amount of time it would have taken you to just go ahead and do the mission itself, or grind the resources by hand for the amount of time you're gaining. So let me explain what I mean here when I say that some of these attachments won't be worth your time. Let's just use the leather attachment as an example. Say you're out hunting animals and you want to farm up 1,000 leather. In order to farm that leather, you can either make an attachment that gives you, say, a 20% increase in the amount of leather you gain from each animal, or you could take the time it would take you to craft that bench and craft that attachment and put it into just going and killing more animals. It would take a lot of harvesting before it actually becomes worth it. Now, I will say that some of these don't apply for that, of course, like the attack speed or melee damage. But when you look at things as well like platinum or titanium attachments, platinum and titanium are pretty rare resources, and sometimes you need a lot of it. These attachments I can see you using on longer term missions, but things like getting extra meat or getting a little bit of extra copper is usually just not going to be worth your time unless they make it like double the amount of resources, which would probably be a bit overpowered. But even like 50% on a tier 1 I think would be reasonable, and like 75% maybe for tier 2 or like 40% tier 1. I don't know the exact numbers. My point is, I just don't think some of these are going to get used very much. Some of you may love them and use them even though it's not worth your time in the mission, but hey, in my personal experience, I probably won't be using them much outside of course, the bleed, poison, and electroshock attachments whenever I want to have really nasty melee DPS for fighting bosses and such. Now, moving on from talking about each attachment, they do also go ahead and mention to us that they will be planning on adding more and changing how these work a little bit based on player feedback. So make sure you go and let the devs know how you guys feel about these attachments, what feels balanced, what doesn't feel balanced. They want your feedback so they can make the game better. They might apply them to ranged weapons in the future. I don't know at this point in time. I think they said they were looking at doing it, but again, they just want to see how it affects at least the melee weapons, which aren't used very much on high-end missions anyways, just to get an idea of how people are going to use them and how the balance feels to players. Now, I did mention earlier that you cannot apply attachments to tier 1 items. These would be things like bone knives probably, or stone knives, stone hatchets, stone pickaxes, but anything else is good to go as far as tools go, outside of anything you bring into the mission with you. That means you can't bring in your special, really good exotic pickaxe. You're going to have to craft one if you want to use these modifiers. Personally, I don't like this. I feel like it's just really unnecessary, but maybe they have some specific reason I'm not thinking of, so feel free to let me know in the comments down below if you can think of a reason they would not allow it for the ones that you're bringing into the mission to be modified, but nonetheless, they don't allow it at this point in time. Currently, either way, the poison knife or the wolf knife are all really good weapons to modify because they allow you to stack multiple debuffs on a single weapon, which is absolutely ridiculous at times. They then go on to talk about the UI a little bit, which I'm going to be honest, I'll just let you guys read yourself. All I'm going to say here is that the new benches actually have 2 different menus based on which side of the bench you're using, which I kind of think is a pretty cool, neat little quality of life feature. I like not having to make 2 benches to do one thing, and I think this is a cool way to go about it. It's something a little bit fresh, a little bit new, that I think most players will enjoy being able to have over having to craft 2 benches. So props to the dev team for that one. Now, there is some other minor things in the changelog that they talk about that really aren't going to change the way you play the game, so I'm not going to get too much into that for you today. However, I will say that if you want to check it out, you can do so simply by going to the Steam community page, clicking news, and reading the most recent patch notes. There is a ton of them. There's always a ton of them. They also talk about some ideas they have for the future, like talking about the new swamp biome that they're working on for future content, which we're all pretty sure is going to be DLC here. Let's be real. Super excited to see how that's going to be. But either way, if you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe. And I want to give a big shout out to Caustic FPV, Jonathan S, and Jim Phillips for being platinum and above supporters on our channel. You guys are awesome, and thank you for all the support you give us. And I want to also thank all our other subscribers and viewers just for continuing to watch these videos, as without each and every one of you, we would not be able to do this. Once again, I am Game Advisor. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.